keep dancing with the devil, one day he's going to follow you home. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And y'all ready to sweat till y'all stank? My name is Shahir Dowd.
And I bet your body remembers me. It's been a while, but I'm Stephen Roberts.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Sinners. Stephen, welcome back.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's been a while.
It's been a while. And it's actually great to have you in person in the room with us.
Yeah, no. It feels good to be back.
Yeah.
You've been traveling a little bit. You've been back and forth out in New York City.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I've been, for work, been bouncing around West Coast, back to New York. But I've been pretty settled and steady in New York, so it's good to be back.
Well, I think this is kind of one of the most amazing pieces of coincidence, and I would attribute it entirely to our podcast only for why this has happened.
What did we do?
But the last time you were on the show was for Ben Affleck's movie Air about the signing of Michael Jordan to Nike. And now you have changed positions. You now work at
Nike.
See, I'm telling you, it's because of us. They heard us. They knew it. They was like, this is the guy for us.
Our very specific audience is whomever is the higher ups at Nike.
Yeah.
I've been listening. Yeah. I got the job. Yep.
We have influence. Can you tell us what you do for Nike?
Yes, I'm a narrative lead for North America Men's Performance. Basically, I get to tell really cool stories about sport and anything where men might do something with a ball or something athletically. I get to tell stories about that.
So if we were doing Creed, this would have been the perfect crossover, right?
No, just
no
because
boxing.
I know boxing. Yeah, boxing is in a Nike sport. So.
Okay. I didn't know that. Yeah. Is there any other Nike?
What is the movie with? Why is this slipping my mind? You put me on the spot. Was Zendaya?
Challengers.
Challengers.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah,
I would have been up my alley.
And then the other thing that you've been doing as well is you also produced a podcast for Crooked Network, the Stacey Abrams podcast.
Yep. Assembly Required with Stacey Abrams. I've had my hand in a bunch of different buckets around there. But yeah, produced that for 6 months, got it off the ground. Really dope experience working with her.
Yeah, I've been listening. It's a great show. It actually it really got me thinking about active involvement in local community issues. And one of the ones I really want to get involved in because it's a big issue for me is cyclists, cyclist safety. I'm really passionate about that and how we can get more cyclists to be wearing helmets and bright colors and all that sort of stuff. So we have less people being hit on the roads. And there was a podcast that you might have produced that I think where Stacey was talking about the need for people to get involved on issues that they're really passionate about on a small level can be really impactful for the Democratic movement.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's definitely up the alley. I've full transparency, I've worked on the show since Halloween.
Yeah.
But so it may have been one of the early episodes that I did. But yeah, no, I think that was something that was really kind of foundational with the show. This idea of, yes, everything is overwhelming at the moment, but you can play your part in the small parts that you play. And that civic involvement can kind of help you ladder up if you choose to. Mm-hmm. But if you want to work in your local and small kind of capacities, do what you can control what you can do. And so, yeah, that's one of the really good things. So I'm glad you got that little boost.
I mean, look, I haven't done anything about it, but I've certainly thought about it.
Listen, the wheels are turning.
I see. Yeah.
I've thought about the dog park.
Yeah,
I have not done anything about fixing the drain at the dog park.
There we go. Hopefully next time on my next appearance.
That's right. We've taken care of cyclists, the dog park. I visited the dog park right by, it was one of them in Manhattan, and it's gorgeous. And we have a fairly nice one here, but it's under the highway. And it's just not, I got jealous of these three other dog parks I walked by. I was like, what committee do I get?
Yeah.
But anyway.
But we are here to talk about Ryan Coogler's latest film. It is his fifth feature film, if I'm not mistaken, right now. We have covered just the two Black Panthers on this show. I wasn't there for one of the Black Panthers.
That's right.
But we have covered Black Panther. We haven't done any of the Creeds.
I believe it was Princess. Princess was with me for
Wakanda Forever.
Yeah.
And I have not seen Creed 2, but I have seen, that's the only one I haven't seen. I've seen Fruitvale Station. And just so we go back on this a little bit, I have been a little mixed on Mr. Coogler.
Interesting.
I liked Fruitvale Station a lot. I liked his ability to turn the Rocky mythology into Creed. I thought that was really powerful. There were moments in that really worked. Obviously, that's another film with Michael B. Jordan. This would be his fourth film with Michael B. Jordan.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Black Panther, I was mixed on. I liked it enough, but I was very moderate on it. And here's the irony is that I wasn't there for Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever might be my favorite Marvel movie.
More than the first Black Panther.
Yeah, way more than the first Black Panther.
So I will say, I think it's better than the first
I think it's way better than the first Black Panther.
I will say the first Black Panther movie, I think it was kind of a very zeitgeisty thing where it was more so the culture around it and kind of getting people out to the theater. But having watched it back a few times, I'm kind of like, oh, this isn't the best movie.
But Wakanda Forever, which has to negotiate Chadwick Boseman's death and then does so in an interesting way. And actually, I think the other thing was that the Mariner, is it the
Submariner?
The Submariner?
Yeah.
I think is a really compelling villain. It's a really compellingly written villain. And I was way more interested in that than I think I have been in almost any Marvel story in a long time.
They better do something with Namor in all of these things coming up, because if they don't, it's insane. Namor is like a staple of Marvel Comics.
Big time.
Isn't he? He's got something to do with Fantastic Four, right? Like he's in love with Miss...
there's dalliances and some things and whatnot, but like he was around with the original Human Torch, the non-Fantastic Four Human Torch.
Played by Michael B. Jordan in the
No, that one wasn't, but the other one was.
Yeah.
So sorry. We're going deep in comic books.
Okay, tell me, which Human Torch are we talking about?
The Human Torch. Okay. Oh God. This is the only podcast about comic books.
Yeah.
So Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four is the Human Torch. Right. However, he's not the original Human Torch.
There's been more.
There was one during World War II, I believe.
It was
I can't remember.
Android. I can't remember the character's name.
Yeah.
But it was an android.
Yeah, and it was him, Cap, Namor, and
Oh.
And there was one other. I'm blanking.
And so Namor had something to do with the Human Torch. With that,
they were this group,
the Defenders.
The Defenders. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So like,
anyway, so while Michael B. Jordan did play Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, he did not play this other Human Torch.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Namor, in a sense, predates Marvel Comics.
Really?
Yeah. And I believe he predates Aquaman too.
Yeah.
You know what I liked about him in Wakanda Forever is I felt like he was a really compelling one-off villain for the world of the Marvel cinema. Like he came in for one specific purpose. It wasn't a sense of being an antagonist to what Wakanda stood for at that point. And he was, but he was genuinely like the thing about great villains is that you can tell that they're the hero in their own story.
Well, the same can be said about Killmonger.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Killmonger was the other one.
I think as far as villains go, the Black Panther films are top tier, sort of just S tier stuff.
Yeah. Which is kind of why I want to circle back to your point that you've been mixed on Ryan Coogler. You seem to like.
Yeah, you seem to be really down with him.
I was not. Like I said, I was mixed on Black Panther.
Yeah.
I really did like Fruitvale Station. I was okay on Creed.
Yep.
I didn't see Creed 2.
Okay. He was producer on that one though.
Did he do another Creed?
There's a third
Creed, but he didn't direct that.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, so which is his fifth film? Well, man, this is so bad posturing on our part, by the way. It's 5 films. So it's Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther. Oh, you're right. Yeah, Black Panther 1 and 2. And then,
there we go.
That makes sense. Sorry. So I didn't miss one.
Numbers.
But I will say this up front. Maybe I would need to revisit Fruitvale Station, but I think Sinners is his best movie.
Agree with that. Yeah.
I would need to revisit Fruitvale Station, but I have I have a lot to talk about with this movie, and I'm excited that we get to talk about it. Can you tell us what it's about?
Well, I will tell you what the Internet Movie Database tells us that Sinners is about. Trying to leave their troubled lives behind, twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. That is true. That is a correct thing. And actually, it was written very nicely. This makes me interested in the movie.
Did you see the trailer?
Yes, I did see the trailer. Here's what I loved about the trailer before we get into the film itself. I knew there were monsters and I had an idea that they might be vampires, but it wasn't like, maybe I only saw the first trailer. I don't know if other trailers sort of gave this away. But there wasn't, I wasn't sure exactly that it would be. So it was nice that even though it is revealed that yes, they are vampires, not only is their mythology and their sort of power set different in a couple different ways from other vampires, the monsters still felt surprising and fresh. Jamie, who is in the other room, saw it with me, and she did not see the trailer. She did not know anything going into it other than it was a horror movie. And so that, she said, was also very fun just to not know. And as I forget if we've talked about this, Stephen, but Sheer, you know this, I'm a bit of a connoisseur when it comes to vampire things. And I'm always, whenever a movie can do vampires, but like their own twist on something that I haven't experienced in that way before, or an allegory for a different thing, or like all this other stuff, I'm here for it. And this movie just fucking did that all day. No, I loved it as well. If that's not obvious, but
I have qualms, but we'll talk about that.
So I actually have a question. As a vampire connoisseur, what was the thing that stood out to you about the set of vampires?
So the thing that I really loved, there was a couple different things. One, they seem to feel each other's pain. And two, and I think the second one is very more important to some of the themes that we'll be talking about in this movie in general, but they also take each other's memories or skills or songs or stories. They are a hive mind in a weird way. And that represents a lot of different stuff that I loved. Also, I liked how this isn't terribly new, but so I like how quick they turn here. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times it takes a long time where it has to be like you drink their blood, they drink your blood. It's a thing. I just really dug that. And I also specifically, I love when there's just one visual flair to a vampire in the look and in the art direction. Yeah. And the shimmer and different color shimmer depending on who is the vampire, just in the eyes, that sort of pinpoint. Yeah. It's my favorite look in graphic novels. It's my favorite look in films. Like when that's the thing that lets you know that it's something else. I fucking love that. But honestly, the feel pain and the sort of hive mindness of it and having each other's, for lack of a better term, I'll just say songs. Yeah. It was the most interesting part to me.
That's really awesome.
It played in that fact, and we'll get into when we get to near the end of this movie, played into one problem I initially had. And then I was like, oh, wait, nope. Aha. No, that makes sense with the resolution of what happened.
Yep.
So I don't know. This movie fucking rocked. I was psyched to see it. Since the trailer came out, this just felt like a winner. I don't know. And now I need to see it again. Steven, you saw it twice.
Yes, I saw it twice. First at BAM, regular Degler movie theater. Second experience, I really wanted to go see it. There's a so it's funny enough, I don't remember the trailer, but what I really remember is the advertisement or the short video that Ryan Coogler did for Kodak. We kind of broke down film.
The different film formats.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah.
Oh, it's really great. You'll love it.
Because it's shot on 65 mil, right?
Yeah, shot on 65 mil. And so there are only 5 theaters in the United States that play it on 70 millimeter at 5 preparations. This is super nerdy.
No, get it?
Sorry. Yeah. But I went to go see it at Alamo Draft House Sunday evening. And so you got to see the movie via film recorder and 70 millimeter.
Yo.
And it was just beautiful.
It is a gorgeous looking movie.
Is that is that the only one in New York, or is
the Lincoln Center?
Lincoln's doing it too.
IMAX, so as an IMAX version, so there 10 theaters in the world have a 70 millimeters in IMAX, and I believe that one is 15 perforated.
Right.
Perf for those listening is Ryan does a way better job of explaining this in Kodak film, but if you look at a film strip, there are 15 perforations on the film. Then there are 5 theaters within the country that are playing it 70 millimeters with 5 perforation.
Yeah.
So that's
and just for reference, 16 millimeters usually 3 perf.
Yes.
So it's a much smaller format.
Yep. So.
And as you kind of would have noted as we went and saw the film, was that this is a large landscape movie. There are long, wide vistas of this movie. And I saw this in a standard 35 millimeter projection.
Gotcha.
I think it was a laser projection. So nothing, there was no film projection of it. And it is extraordinary looking film and a wide film. And I could just imagine that in 5 perf, 65 mil or in the 70 millimeter IMAX screening, that you get a much bigger sense of the actual scale of the sky that they have in the Mississippi, like how big it is. And like that in contrast to the actual cotton fields that are out there.
Yeah.
I need to see it at IMAX. That was my thing I wanted to
definitely do. Yeah, I know it's super sold out in the city, but we'll keep it in theaters.
But I want
Thunderbolts comes.
Well, I we haven't heard your opinion on the movie, but I kind of feel like I know what it is. But the other thing was, this was one of the first experiences, because I'm normally, when we talk about perforations and large format, if a film is filmed in 65 mil and there's an opportunity to see it in IMAX in large format, I will definitely make that trip. However, this was the first film when, after I saw it for the first time, I was like, what I think is actually going to make this a great experience is seeing this in a packed house. Like I actually felt that the audience experience was way more important than the actual projection itself. And this is the first time in a while that I felt that way. Like normally it's, a filmmaker who is obviously associated with this film in some ways, Christopher Nolan, not least of which because of his Warner Brothers deal, which he's left behind. And Coogler is kind of like picking up, not picking up the pieces up, but like is filling in that void as well. But Christopher Nolan likes to do those big, expansive, screenings. There's always reruns of Interstellar, which I think are hugely successful. But this was one where I was like, what I think really matters here is the audience participation in the film. This is, to put it sort of in context for me, it's a fucking sexy movie. Mm-hmm. It's like a really like, it's a sort of like, it's like Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman, Batman Returns. It's got this sort of like drawl to it, which is just like lingerous, and you've got to watch it and pay attention to it. It's something very sensual about the way the scenes are put together.
1000%.
Like it's a very sensual, sexy movie. Not least of which is Michael B. Jordan looks great, wearing what he wears. But the music, the sequences of the music, you and I were talking a little bit about Spike Lee's Malcolm X.
It was actually He Got Game.
It was both. No, we were talking about both. Yeah. Actually, there's a sequence in Malcolm X where they do like a dance hall sequence, and it's like extraordinary to watch, and it's like one of the best ever. This has that sense of it, and then in the middle of this, if you listeners have seen the movie, and I said the words "the shot," we all know what we're talking about, right? Like everybody knows what we're talking about when we talk about the shot.
Yeah,
there is a shot in this movie that is simply breathtaking, and I will say this. It's been hard to be proud of America for like the last, like the last little bit.
What happened? What's been going on?
Like we talked a little bit about Neja 2 last week, where we were like, it's amazing and it's awesome that there are these films from other countries coming in that are like, we are experiencing this sort of broad exchange of ideas on a grand scale. And, it's been hard to like, I'm sort of speaking broadly. It's been hard to like be proud of the way America is going. But this was a moment when I was in this movie, when that happened, when the shot happened, I was like, when I was a kid, this is what I loved about American cinema, was this sense of innovation, this sense of storytelling that was grand. There's a scale to this, which is enormous, but it's grounded by people who are telling deeply personal stories with unique ideas. And the way that the palette of the film expands in that moment, I was like, this is what I love about America. This is the thing about like Americana, American culture. Obviously, this is steeped in an enormously difficult part of American history, but it is not weighed down by it. It is simply acknowledging that history and uses it to tell a really powerful story in of itself. Now, again, I have problems with like some of the parts of this film, but the first 45 minutes to an hour of this movie, I was completely grinning from ear to ear, knocked off my seat when the shot happened, and just in love with like the way, the sense that the storytelling was dealing with minor details. Like, in The Godfather, they talk about like, what is it that the mob does and how does it actually work? In this, there's a sense of like, what is it to come back to a community and try to get back to it while still, trying to lift it up. And the way that he negotiates with a little girl who has to look after a truck for him. I was just like, I love everything about it. I was like so floored by it.
That's amazing.
I don't want to see how you feel about it.
Oh no, equally I loved it. I think we touched on top, like I saw it twice. And I think each viewing experience, format, even throwing format out the window, I think each viewing experience I took away something different from the film.
Yeah.
I think the first viewing experience kind of touches on like your first point that you were making about kind of the collective viewing of the film.
Yeah.
And I was at BAM, which is in Fort Greene, which is I don't want to say rapidly gentrifying neighborhood because it's kind of been gentrified already, but it's a mixed neighborhood.
Yeah.
And one of the things I didn't expect going into the movie theater was kind of hearing people talking at the screen.
Yeah.
People talking at, hey, there's a vampire behind you. Stop it, girl. Eat that garlic. And like, that really made me smile.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it was just like, oh yeah. It's like it's an experience you kind of forget about.
Yeah.
Because I think we are so in our own worlds watching movies a lot of the time, and like those super specific cultural moments where you have just people interacting with the film just made it like, oh yeah, this is a film about these people, black people, my people, watching themselves and seeing how they would interact with something, which was like something super completely unexpected and beautiful that I really loved about it. Then I think in my second viewing experience, it was in the 70 millimeter, but you got to take a step back. And
Yeah.
you got to see kind of the artistry of what was being done
Yeah.
in the film. And you saw it in the first BAM. It's a beautiful movie. That was great. But I think kind of comparing these two, it just made like, yeah, this is such a well-rounded story that's being told. And I think it's funny. You bring up the idea of like, this, whether it's versus this is for a community experience or like the artistry of it. I actually think it's this funny thing where Coogler, it feels like in listening to interviews with him, seems like a very personal film to him. It's like a super personal film, but because it's so hyper specific, it has this appeal that it appeals to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Where they're able to see themselves. Yeah.
Well, it takes what I would imagine his experience is sort of like crafting art and also crafting art that other people use in different way. And actually, weirdly enough, I'm sure we'll get into this more, but we could touch on it now. The behind the scenes or sort of like reporting on this movie has been weird. Are both of you familiar with the story before?
Go on, yeah. I've read about this.
Yeah, so there's a few different articles going on. One was in Vulture, one was in Variety, and the way that they were talking about it, even though I believe it opened to like 61 million or something in the first weekend, which for an original IP R-rated movie after COVID, holy shit.
Yeah.
But the way that it was sort of spoken about, especially in headline town, was like, hey, you know, it's a great opening weekend, but boy, oh boy, it has a long way to go before it's profitable because of this, and this. And then a lot of people, Ben Stiller came out and was like, in what world do you talk about a success story like this, like it's like an awful uphill battle still? And then so the deal behind what Coogler got from Warner Brothers here was sort of threefold things. One, he got Final Cut. That's a fairly common thing for a director if you have clout. Two, he gets points first before the movie makes money back, which is a bit rarer. And then three, in 25 years, the rights go back to him.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I don't fully agree with this conspiracy theory. I think there's a lot of different reasons why the reporting is this, especially because like in those publications, it feels like they have insider people in the studio system that I don't think like they're giving them like direction to say a thing, but they definitely get vibe checks and they sort of understand the feeling of the room. And I think the fact that Ryan Coogler was able to negotiate the ownership of his film back, and especially, which side note completely ties in to the actual narrative of the goddamn film, which is so perfect, chef's kiss. But that is a intrinsic danger to how studios make money. Studios make money off their back catalog. That is, and I'm not even saying that's bad to do. That's how the studio system has worked. But if they see that as sort of like a real problem, like their worry was like, well, if Ryan Coogler's asking for it, then everyone's going to. And it's like, if that's the case, I just don't buy that. Like, you have to fucking be as talented as Ryan Coogler, have all the hits that Ryan Coogler has had, and then you can ask for these things, and you should probably give them to them if you want them working with your studio. So I don't know, like there's just this odd feeling around it, which hopefully that conversation has been elevated, at least in my online circles, and people have all their reasons, and people are blaming the studios for being greedy. People are saying it is racist. People are saying there's a bunch of different things. I think it's probably a smattering of everything. However, what I've seen weirdly is this knock-on effect, even on like Reddit threads and groups that I read, where people are like, oh, that's that movie. I saw the trailer for it. That looked cool. This reminded me to go see it. So like, I'm really excited to see weekend 2 box office of this, because I don't think it's going to stop. I think word of mouth, even with this nonsense going on the side, has been really, really positive for this movie. And I am so on board for a brand new R-rated horror IP with actually like a lot to fucking say. Like, case in point, we reviewed Companion on this show. Did you see Companion?
No, I didn't. No,
it's really fun. I called it like super high genre film. Like it's just sort of like the best kind of nom 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 kind of whatever. It has some things it's saying. People and listeners can go back and listen to our episode on that. But what Sinners does is just elevates like the sort of like basically the horror genre to its my favorite heights, which is it's saying multiple things on multiple levels while also fucking kicking ass and being scary. And that is something in a new IP I feel like I haven't seen come through the theaters in a little bit. And I don't know, I found it incredibly refreshing to watch.
Yeah, well, I think the thing there is that, and why I talked about this sort of idea of like being enamored by American culture in this moment was that the shot, as we're going to talk about it, was not just speaking to the audience, but speaking to the history of what this type of film is and to the characters that are in the film as well. Like there's a synergy happening with that shot. So if you haven't watched the film, please go watch the film. But in this moment, we realize that Sammy, the blues player, has this power of music that is not not unfamiliar to the Robert Johnson story, the Devil at the Crossroads story. Robert Johnson was a blues player who was so good that the myth, and this is a common myth in music, that he had sold his soul to the devil in order to play the guitar so well.
There's also a great BMW film with James Brown.
Yep, there you go. Also, Paganini. Paganini, the violinist, the same story, like so good that they'd sold their soul to the devil to do it. In this one, that mythology is slightly changed, which is that their capacity with music is so powerful that the devil comes because their music has
an otherworldly quality and a power.
Yeah, and a power. And then the power is what's important here, because in that shot, Coogler essentially illustrates what the power is, which is the power conjoins both their past, present, and future together. And so in that moment, what we see is as Sammy plays his song and the guitar, suddenly there's a DJ there. Suddenly there are African dancers from the old country, from Africa there. There are suddenly a sort of new rock, sort of like, funk. Afro funk kind of, like in the middle of that, and the house burns down.
Hell, even the Chows had, there was different, I don't know the exact name of the dancers and the style of art they were doing, but they had people there too because they were mixed into that.
And so it was just this sense of like, this is what is powerful, not just about this character's music, but about our music, about why this is all together. And then that's such a powerful moment for the audience that when you just see, people are talking to the screen, like that scene is an invitation, like it is an invitation to the audience to talk to the screen. Because you are now in the movie. And it's such a powerful moment.
Yeah.
So I loved it for that reason. And I think then again, everything that the movie does around that, like for the first hour, again, I said this, is so good. It's so patient. It's so slow where, like Delroy Lindo in this movie, Delroy Lindo is of course a national treasure. He's British, of course, but he's just this stalwart.
International treasure. And, he should be sort of spoken in the same way as Morgan Freeman or someone like that. Just that sort of grand Anthony Hopkins kind of thing. Yeah.
But there's a moment where they're crossing and they see a chain gang. And he says, he makes them slow down the car, and he grabs his hat and he says, "Keep your head up," or something along those lines. And I was like, that moment, knocked me off my feet as well. It was just like this powerful understanding of the place, the culture, the sense, the tragedy, all coming together in this one beautiful piece. And then for me, when it's combined with the idea of Ryan Coogler, an African-American filmmaker who's making billion-dollar movies, and who does not have to cross over. I think he doesn't have to do the crossover thing of like, the question is like, is he going to make a white movie or anything like that? I don't think that's even in the conversation. All of that put together just makes this beautiful milieu. Now, I think the vampire stuff, for me, it got a little messy, and it got a little bit like, there's a lot of mythology at work here, and I guess maybe for me, the only thing is it's not as interesting as the world building around it, but it works. It certainly works. It's a genre film. It brings people in. I just found that by the time we got into the From Dusk Till Dawn kind of territory of this movie, I had found that my excitement about where this film was going waned a little bit there.
Interesting. But I feel like you want to jump in.
Well, I was going to say before I tossed it back to you, it was like, I found the vampire stuff the perfect antithesis to everything else this movie was doing well. It was the thing that was honestly, I thought, balanced and felt like it was threatening all of those things. Not only what's happening in the movie, but the ideas that they were trying to get across. the way sound is used in this movie, for instance, like right after Delta Slim waves at the chain gang and he tells the story in the car, you start hearing the story. That happens a couple times in the movie. I saw it, Steven. You were I don't want to keep jumping back, but it felt like you had something to say about the shot.
It's something really beautiful about the shot, which is you kind of detailed beautifully there. But I think there were shots before that stood out to me.
Yeah.
I would say the opening, well, not quite well, you know what, honestly, the opening shot of the film, having seen it in laser and then in 70 millimeter, it's mirroring what happens.
Right.
You see what happens in that shot as you approach, Sammy first approaches Father's church. You see everything that's happened behind him in the shot.
Yeah.
It looks better in 70 millimeter, but you can see it. However, throughout the movie, there's this kind of constant, like, time is a flat circle.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really stood out to me, and we're talking about the communal experiences, was you see Sammy opens the film after the opening scene. You see him picking cotton.
Yeah.
And he's not picking cotton from a slavery standpoint. He's a sharecropper now.
Yeah.
Which is, when we talk about America, it's often... Slavery is often kind of viewed as this thing that happened a long time ago.
We solved it, right?
Yeah, we solved it. This is good. But like, it's never, okay, what happened after slavery?
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a snapshot of here's what happened after slavery. Here you have these former enslaved people who are now, they have nowhere to go. If they actually do venture off and try to do something themselves, they're arrested and put back into slavery via chain gang.
Or they're in Jim Crow South.
Which is its own thing. And so you have these people kind of picking cotton, and you also see they're not even really being paid for that. They're being paid in credits.
Yeah.
And you see how those credits kind of keep them in a sickler motion where they're stuck on the
company fucking store.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you see how all these people are kind of caught in these cycles. And then you see how the twins themselves are caught in a cycle of violence as a result of their father, who happens to be a musician. And that cycle of like kind of him abusing them and them leaving to go to the military, more violence, and then going to Chicago, working with gangs. And you see like there's a constant kind of this cyclical thing that's happening throughout the movie that really stood out to me. So as much as that shot was beautiful and I've never seen anything like it, I think that was a common theme throughout the film, how all these things exist in these cycles.
There was another one where they go to the general store that Bo and Grace run.
Mm-hmm.
And, is it Short or Stack? I can't remember.
Smoke goes to the store.
Smoke goes to the store. And he requests a lot of stuff, and his daughter, Bo's daughter,
Lisa,
has to walk across the street to get the mother in another store. And I didn't realize this until I was following someone on Twitter about it.
It's the white
research
store.
Yeah, there was a black store. So a lot of these stores were run by Asian immigrants. And one thing they would do is they would serve African-American, customers, which a lot of white stores wouldn't.
Yeah.
So they would have two stores for this function. One of those that would serve African-American people, one that would serve white people. And she has to walk across the street to a whole other store. And this is this quality that I think Coogler does that, that a few filmmakers just don't get the hang of, is he's patient with them. Like, we do the full walk. We see the whole distance that person's going to travel. It's not cut up in any way because he wants you to feel the distance between these two things in order to understand that space.
And also, if you look at that film, that's also a metaphor what kind of happens later on in the film.
Yeah.
Because it's a bridge between these two worlds.
Exactly.
And Grace essentially acts as that bridge.
Yeah. It's funny. I think Coogler has an excellent handle on doing that in a lot of his films. It's like even though it is not a obviously real culture, like the way he handles Wakanda, he takes a lot of time in places that normally you wouldn't in that kind of superhero genre film to handle, because he understands that that's sort of important. Here, even though this is the actual past that happened, or it takes place in that time, to both of your points, a lot of people don't understand the history of that era, so it is also kind of alien to them. And it's nice to spend time in the town. I really loved, Shahir, like you said, the first half of this movie. I didn't love it more than the second half, but I fucking love when a horror movie with fucking monsters doesn't touch it till like 2/3 through. Like it makes it so. It's funny. There's the comparison one of you said from Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
From Dusk Till Dawn, though, is like grindhousey, right? Like it's not it From Dusk Till Dawn doesn't have a lot to say. Where this movie, while again it has the similarities of going about 2/3, oh shit, vampires, but it feels very much that it's doing it for a reason and not just because Salma Hayek has a snake.
Just to defend From Dusk Till Dawn for a second.
I love From Dusk Till Dawn.
The first half of it has actually got more on its mind about the relationship between those two brothers, George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. And it does a lot with that. And it does a lot with Harvey Keitel's character in terms of talking about what faith means. And before it goes into kind of the grindhouse, I'm just saying, just to defend it, it does a similar thing. And I also, that's not to deter what you're saying in terms of the way the grindhouse goes. But it is a sort of similar idea that before we deteriorate into chaos, we should enjoy the place that we're in.
Well, yeah, you see the world, you understand what's happening. You should understand the world. And more than anything, he's not in a rush to get to it. Yeah.
And, and that would be one thing on its own if executed well. It just so happens he executes it like better than most filmmakers will ever execute any film in their entire lives. Because it all builds to the shot. Mm-hmm. It tells the story of these two brothers and their journey. And that journey is filled with like really interesting details about who these characters are. Mm-hmm. Again, I loved Smoke. Yeah. Smoke negotiating with that little girl. Yeah. It's like, hey, when we're about to exchange money, when money's coming into play, it needs to be a negotiation. I'm going to offer you this. You need to come at me with another number. And he's not doing that because, he's trying to trick her or anything. He's doing that because the entire goal of their reason that they're there is that they want to come back to their community.
Yeah.
And they want to come back and give something to their community. And while they're criminals, while they're like, bootlegging alcohol and what have you, they have made clear choices about like who they are. And whenever they shoot someone, like, here's the money to go get yourself patched up. And
to your point, it's cyclical, right?
Yeah.
Smoke then goes and does the exact thing he teaches the girl to do with Grace.
Yeah.
So like, it's just, I don't know. It's a real practice.
When someone comes to the bar and can't afford to buy a drink, but like offers them credits, as you mentioned, like.
I think Stack is the one who says it's fine.
Stack is the one who says Smoke is very business, like the super emotional one, but very business and blunt.
Yeah.
Stack is a bit more poetic.
Yeah. And he's the one that kind of falls in love with Miles, kind of in his ability to play music.
Yep.
And
theme that again cycles throughout.
Yeah.
One thing I did, I was really interested that the film kind of spawned me off into was just to try and find the origins of the word juke house. Mm-hmm. Like, just where does that word come from, or how does it work? Like, and we obviously think it's got jukebox or something like that in it. But there was I hadn't heard of Zora Neale Hurston before.
Oh wow,
I hadn't.
Okay,
I really hadn't. So I went on a deep dive on that today, and she was an American anthropologist, an African American anthropologist who actually spent time in her own communities, which was kind of unusual for anthropologists at that time because she wanted to be part of the story. Well, part of the communities that she was in. And this was at a time when people didn't really study those communities in the way that she was doing. And she wrote this essay, amongst a lot of books, the characteristic of the Negro expression. And apologies for the vernacular. It was written in 1934. But this was the paragraph that I took out was, juke is a word for the Negro pleasure house. It may mean a bawdy house. It may mean the house set apart on public works where men and women dance, drink, and gamble. Often it is a combination of all these. In the past generations, the music was furnished by boxes, another word for guitar. One guitar was enough for a dance. To have two was considered excellent. Where two was playing, one man played the lead and the other seconded him. The first player was picking and the second was framming. That is, playing chords while the lead carried the melody by dexterous fingers work. Sometimes a third player was added, and he played tom-tom effects on low strings. Believe it or not, this is excellent dance music. Pianos soon came in and took the place of the boxes, and now player pianos and vitriolas are all in the jukes. Musically speaking, the juke is the most important place in America, for in its smelly, shoddy confines has been born the secular music known as the blues, and on blues has been founded jazz. Like I when I read that, I was like, oh my God.
That's really that's interesting. Like, you weren't familiar with it. And then also you weren't familiar with Zora Neale Hurston. But it's funny, my family, so when I bring up like, oh, cotton's not that far removed. My grandmother used to pick cotton for work before she went to school.
Yeah.
And so she did that. And then we also had like a juke house that my great grandfather ran.
Yeah.
So like these are things that when I see them in the film, I'm like, I know this instantly.
I was sort of maybe aware of it in a cinematic sense because I've never, been to the South and I never was aware of it. But then, like the familiarity with which Coogler deploys it as well and treats it, like to the point where, someone says, can you smell what's on the floor? Like this was an old sawmill. Mm-hmm. These are the rooms. This is how it works. These are the lights. These are, like it all feels lived in a way that kind of is really beautiful and meaningful. And then it is tied to this idea that again, coming back to the idea of like why American culture is so important to me is that it relates to the sort of sense that the blues is where this was born. This is the foundation of jazz, eventually leads to the foundation of rock and roll, and then eventually hip hop as we know it now. And, it is the most, important art forms that America exports to the world.
This is very true. Same with cinema.
Yeah. Yeah,
like I believe in Us, like it's the first shot that's ever caught on camera was a black man riding a horse, was a cowboy. Yeah. You think of things like vaudeville, and kind of the history of blackface and Al Jolson and all of that, and that kind of being at the center of it. But that kind of was birthed like cakewalking and like with black slaves, enslaved people, kind of impressing and doing shows for like various white masters and trying to impress them while making fun of them. So like there's this history of like, if you look at America from the perspective, and I think Nicole Hannah-Jones did a good job of this with the 1619 Project, you can always look at America from different perspectives. Yeah. If you were to look at it from 1619 and look how culture evolved from the first African enslaved people touching America and how that expanded American culture that we see today. Yeah. That's a really interesting way to look at the world. And
unless you're angry about it and it's from the 1716.
You can be angry about it, but like, here's some fact-based things that happen. And here's how they, again, cyclical, ladder up to where we are today. And so you could also look at it from the perspective of 1776. Yeah. You look at it even further back from when white people first came, 1492, first came to the Americas. So there's different ways to look at things. And I think this is one of the cool things about this film is it looked at America and the horror genre from this particular perspective and presented you a story.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, and it uses that horror to, I think, really enhance the story that it's trying to tell. Something, a minor moment, but that I loved. So when the first vampire Remick is introduced, he's, see him fall onto this frame, beautiful, he's burning, and he runs to the clan member's house, and he's being chased. Yep. And who is he being chased by but Native American vampire hunters? Okay. This says a lot where they're trying to help these people that suck, and then they're not letting them be helped, and then they're like, all right, well, we've got to go. Yeah. And like, in that moment, I was like, even in that small exchange, it's like, this is a group that despite everything that has happened to them is still trying to like do something good. And then is like told no. And they're like, great. And they just go. And like, it's this not listening to people who understand what is going on. I thought that was very telling in the Native American, again. And I love that they never show up again. Yeah. What I didn't want was for them to show up at the end or do something else. No. Yeah. They were there and dealing with it and tried their best and they told them to fuck off and they left. And it's like, I loved that so much as a tie-in.
But also at the very opening credits of the film, there's this conversation, which is that it is all cultures that have this connection to music, including the Native Americans who have this ability to ability to create music that is transcendent and is a language that is transcendent that bridges time and good and evil.
And so what we're talking about, even blues music, cinema, etc. The cool thing I really like about what the monsters and the vampires are doing in this movie is it's doing exactly what other cultures, American culture, does to all of the melting pot sort of coming around it is they want it and they want to take it and sort of hive mind gestalt, sort of hive mind it together and make it all one ubiquitous thing. And again, I loved that it played into the specific type of vampire and whatever supernatural thing. They sense the ability, this supernatural power of music that Miles has. And they want it. Yep. Yeah. And to the point where they're like pulled to it and they want to I love that like
there's an exchange to be had.
Yeah. Right? And they're trying to trick their way in first.
Yep.
And they're like, oh no, well, whatever. And they try to play it. They try to play the like a weird reverse race card.
Yeah.
And then eventually it devolves into no, I want your fucking ability. Like,
but then what's cool about that character, as much as I found the vampire stuff less interesting, the idea that the Irish, first off, there was a moment where I was like, Lord of the Dance is evil. And I just like love that idea that they're like Lord of the Dance was the most evil, but it wasn't that. It's this idea that the Irish are a colonized people as well and have experienced the same thing and can identify with what's going on. But unfortunately, they are also able to navigate both white cultures and black cultures in the same way and do so to their own advantage. And eventually it comes down to like, look, we are offering you something here that could help your culture. But essentially, it's kind of like signing a record deal, like it's going to be shitty for you in the long run. They don't really say it that way, but it is like, we're going to take your music, we're going to exploit it for as long as we can, and we are going to absorb all parts of who you are, who your culture is, how this all works. And through that, you will be safe. And through that, you will be safe. Through that, you will no longer be hunted. You can be a predator and you will live forever. But that's the sort of Faustian bargain of this film. And I actually think, like the Namor thing, where Namor is the central character in his own story, there's something about, is it Remick?
Remick, yeah.
Yeah, in this, where it's like, there is a clear understanding that Coogler has with all the sort of villain characters that he writes, or the antagonist characters, that like, they are the heroes of their stories.
Well, he's a beast, but he's also not wrong in his mind. Like that's what it is.
And I think Remick is like such an interesting character. We talked about Namor earlier. I think Remick is very much up there. Yeah. Because I think vampirism in this movie is kind of analogous to whiteness. Yeah. And this idea that the Irish weren't originally considered white. Italians weren't considered white. Like whiteness used to be preserved for Anglo-Saxons. Yeah. So, but as you come to America, and you are then indoctrinated in America and you become assimilated, you then become white. Yeah. And so I think like that's kind of one of the major themes that shows up here. And I think the thing that makes Remick so kind of interesting is because he longs for his heritage. Yeah. He still remembers it. Yeah. It's one of the really beautiful things towards the end of the film as Sammy starts saying a prayer and Remick says it too. He's like, yeah, they colonized my people too. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I know, like, I say it to comfort myself, but I know it's like the master's tool to do so. Yeah. So it's like this really beautiful, complicated villain where he really is longing to be connected back to what he loves, but in doing so, he's destroying others.
And his very existence and the vampirism of it all is what's actually stopping him from being able to do it. He's longing for this thing that he'll never have, so he will instead consume. Yeah. And if that's not the most American thing I can think of. Yeah.
But, like with the way you said it just before, so I read Isabella Wilkinson's book, Caste, like where she talks about this idea that there's a distinction between caste and race. Caste, you are locked into, and race you can transcend. So in the case of the Irish, they were able to essentially forget being Irish at some point and become white. And that is very different to African Americans who will always remain in that otherized category, according, to the way Wilkinson describes it. And I think
that according to life.
And according to life. And that's that powerful thing that I think the movie is navigating as well with that character. But what's, again, genius about, what Coogler does here is it's not a history lesson. It's not a point to be made that's didactic in any way. It is part of the ether of the way that the film works. It is absorbing all of that sort of influence and then telling its own story.
I get what you're saying and I agree with it. I'm going to yes and you, but it's going to sound like a no but, and it's really not. Okay. I think it is a history lesson. I think this is the best kind of history lesson. Yeah. 3/4 of my job is retelling history in an interesting enough and narrative way so it fucking sticks with people. This is something you can point to this movie, this kick-ass vampire movie. And also, there are deep themes, both super deep, right in the middle, on the surface, that you can find and sort of grab onto from different people in this particular time in American history that you don't get often in popular culture. And so, like, I think this is one of the most effective history lessons that I've seen in a major motion picture in a long time. We talk about war movies. Yeah. We've had a big debate over, like, well, what's the point of a war movie? We won't get into it here, but like the cool thing about this kind of story, because it is incredibly violent and scary and brutal, there is truly, I believe, a point to the violence. And it's because the rest of the movie, the first 2/3 of the movie, all of the other care with the both historical accuracies and just the way showing people how they lived their lives in that time, like that's what keeps that foundation up. So when they start ripping arms off and fucking gouging people's chests open, it actually means something and is tied to what the movie's trying to do.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Matt in terms of it kind of being a history lesson. I think we often think of like a history lesson as being taught in a textbook.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back, who made that textbook? Who wrote that history and different things like that? And so sometimes if you are not, talk about cast, if you are not kind of the dominant cast, your way of telling history has to be subversive. It has to sneak things in. So then that way you're part of the story is people are like, oh, that's an interesting way to think of that.
Yeah,
I had it.
I don't disagree with that. I think the way I'm expressing that is that it's not a lesson. It happens to encompass the sort of facets of history that are important, but it doesn't feel like a lesson.
In my opinion, the best lessons are the ones you don't realize you're getting.
Yeah.
Like,
but I think that's also why it's so impressive, is because it's made by a filmmaker who's coming out of the studio system at this point. He's only made one independent feature outside of this, but is working entirely in the studio system. And like, someone else like that is Christopher Nolan, who, does a film like Oppenheimer, which feels more like a lesson than this film does. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Like,
how so?
I feel like that is more of a history lesson about who Robert Oppenheimer was than the way this is a lesson about the history of the American South.
I disagree.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
completely.
Okay, you disagree that is
completely.
Like that.
Why is that held to this level and this isn't?
It's not a case of levels. It's just that what I'm saying is that feels more like I'm being talked to and given a history lesson.
I wonder if that's
that. What about that makes it feel like?
Well, because it is directly like relaying past events with like historical accuracy and even to the point of actually like factualizing events. Whereas this, I think, is set in a place, and it is absorb the history, but is not telling me a story, telling me a history lesson.
Remember to my earlier point?
Yeah.
The dominant culture gets to put things in books and gets to document things, while the culture that's at the bottom of the cast has to tell it in subversive ways because they don't have access to do so. Same way with music. Music is your way in which you communicate your blues. I feel terrible because I'm living in an apartheid system. And you have to, let me finish.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's this idea of you are expecting history to be taught from a way that's, this is historically accurate. This is fact check and different things like that. But the greatest part of human history, we haven't known how to read. Things have been told through oral culture and culture being handed down. It hasn't been documented. So to me, and I think Matt as well, when you're saying, this feels more historically accurate.
No. I'm not saying it's historically accurate. I'm saying it feels
like a lesson.
It feels more didactic.
But it's being presented in a way that you're used to history being
presented to you, which is kind of, again, I'm teaching you something, the lesson.
Maybe a better example would be Malcolm X. Malcolm X feels like a history.
Gotcha.
And this is no way like deriding one over the other.
Yeah.
It's just saying that what the genius for me of Sinners is that it doesn't feel like a history.
See, I think it's more effective. See, and we all learn differently, right? Like, both Malcolm X and Oppenheimer are looking at a man's life and the things that happen around it and going through the beats of it as told by the predominant people who knew that history at the time, like whatever sources they're pulling from. But it is doing and then, which again, exquisitely, but that's kind of the structure.
And I want to make that clear as well. It's not to take away from those films or anything like that. You're saying, what I'm trying to get at is why I think this is so good.
Yeah, those structures, I think, Stephen, to your point, kind of settle into more of what we would traditionally think of that we were learning history from. This man did this and this and this and this happened, and oh boy. Whereas this is something that, and weirdly, movies in Hollywood in general tends to do historical stuff based on that. There's genre, and you play with it, and you can talk about a time, and like, again, war movies don't always have real people, characters in them. They try to give the flavor of what was going on, etc. Here in Sinners, it's just like, I feel like the lesson and the history is going to actually stick in more people that wouldn't ever look that kind of thing up because it's told so exquisitely. And again, not in the horror element. The horror element has something to say about it, but we've all sort of said the first 2/3 of the movie where they're just driving around town setting up the juke joint. We're like, shit, like this is how this was. It was either when Delta Slim was right after he tilted his cap to the chain gang, or when they first met him. It might have been when they first met him at the train station, where he was talking about what he'd been up to or something like that. He was talking about how he played for a bunch of rich white folks, and then and they were really like dancing around, and then he says something, I'm gonna butcher the line, but he's like, and then we just change it up to
so they couldn't dance,
so they couldn't catch it, but like it's that subtle thing you were talking about, Stephen, like where you have to sort of hide it as that part of the culture. You have to hide those things in here, and like they're never going to be the wiser, because if they were, that would be bad for you, but you're getting in your stuff as well as it's going on. So like I tie that whole thing to I'll even call it like historical lessons about the time that this movie is doing. It is taking these things that we don't normally get in the format that we usually are told lessons in, and sneaking them in because it is a safe and effective way to do so. This movie fucking rocks.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I love it.
So I will say that once once Grace sees Letterman and we are kind of trapped in the room with vampires coming in, it's not, the scene actually doesn't linger too long. It's
really quick.
It's pretty quick.
Even say I don't like the fight scene. I think the fight scene with the initial one when they come in is confusing and sloppy, and I had no idea what was going on.
My point was I'm
just saying that was one problem I did have.
Sure, that is a problem with it, but also at the same time I was just less interested in the dynamics of what's at play here. Like I'm just less interested in like how this is all going to resolve itself, and it's like everything else has been so much more fascinating. I
think Ryan Coogler was the least excited about that moment, because it felt like the one that was like, oh well, and now we have to do that.
And I was just listening. I had a note that I kind of thought of today, and it's that sort of note where it's like, this is obviously in retrospect, obviously in hindsight of someone who's watched the film and just thinking about how the pieces come together. But one of the things about the ending of the film that I kind of felt didn't work for me was
ending?
Well, this is the point, is that there was a sense of we were lingering around the story towards the back end of it, and not quite sure where to get out, or like how to get out in the most effective way. I kind of found myself going, I think we're wrapped up now, but we're kind of still here. And to that extent, like eventually the Klansmen come back, and like what we learn is that so when Smokestack had bought the mill, they had like said, this is the only money you're going to get. If you ever come on our property again, we will kill everyone on sight. And they had planned always to come back to take back the money and
had the crate,
and the mill, and he had a crate. And so my note was, I wonder if it just kind of felt like we were doing two different assaults on Precinct Juke House. You know what I mean? Like where there were two. And my note was, it would be interesting if the Klan arrived and then the vampires arrived, because the vampires could like interplay between the two of them. And I was like, and again, I don't know if it'll work, but I was like feeling like there was just a double beat going on here.
So first was soft power.
Yeah.
Second was power.
Yes, but one was also a repeated story beat, which was the fighting back of one group against the other.
But soft power comes first.
Soft power also had vampires.
Yeah,
but it's weird. But vampires were soft power.
They were soft power. Yeah, they were. Hey, everyone, let's all come together. This can be us, and we're going to take it.
Yeah, but, and we can kill you. Yeah, and we're going to kill.
Yeah. But that's what we're going to do first.
Yeah.
You guys said no. All right, cool. We're going to kill you now. So that's what's happening.
Like they even have a moment. Remick says like, "Oh, when he gets his two buddies from the Klans people that he ran into
they
first,
were planning to kill you."
Yeah, he's like, "I stopped them. Like they were coming. They're gonna come for you, and we're here first. We can get you out."
And I think there was just for me again, that sort of note about it. There's an opportunity to kind of do more with that idea that these people were coming to kill you, and here they are.
I like that they're separate.
I just found that towards the back end of it, like. I found that there was just both a lingering and also like a sort of lesser interest in how are we going to kill these people. Like, I found that sort of less interesting.
Kill which people?
How the vampires were going to attack this group that were in the sawmill, and then how they were going to, defend themselves against that.
Oh, they weren't.
And then the second time when, is it Smoke or Stack? Stack has the crate of guns, right?
Yeah, it's Smoke. Stack is the brother who becomes
a vampire. Like it's I'm all for it, and I want to see that scene, but I kind of felt that the movie had kind of reached a crescendo, stopped, and then started another crescendo, and that's kind of where I was like, oh, could this be combined into one where now we have three groups having to duke it out?
So I guess I don't see it as them being separate groups.
Right.
I see them being as waves.
Yeah, wave 1 and wave 2.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's how I see it.
Right. But wave 2 doesn't know about wave 1 here. Like the Klansmen don't know anything about the vampires that
from a pure beat for beat, the groups know, but so they're not interrelated. If the vampires hadn't attacked, the clans would still attack.
Yes.
Right. And if the vampires,
they represent different power structures of the same enemy, though.
Yeah. But and that's
things in films mean stuff.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that again, my interest waned towards the back end. Now it might. I'm happy to see this movie again, but that was my initial thing about this.
It's a really interesting movie, and you guys may have already seen it. It's actually a documentary that was nominated this year.
Know the Land?
No. With a white, my brain. Soundtrack to Coup d'etat.
Yeah.
I've not seen it. No.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. I know exactly what it's about, which is the power of music and jazz players coming into. Is it? It was Brazil.
No. It's Democratic Republic of Congo.
Congo. That's right.
But I think outside of the music aspect, which is obviously a common here, you first get to see how soft power works.
Yeah.
And then you get to see how power works. And so by the same government.
But in that case, it is one unit that is trying to get them and using two different modes of power.
But to me, the vampires and the clan are the same.
Yeah, they both represent whiteness, but different elements that whiteness uses against these people.
Mm-hmm. Colonization, perhaps, is the way that you could think about it. There's a force that is going to be colonizing these.
I don't know if it would be colonization, considering that they were already brought here enslaved. So colonization might not be the word.
It's cultural appropriation. It's taking art forms and making it kind of yours. We're melting pot, but you're really just taking sort of credit.
Yeah.
There's I loved that the ending with the clan was just one dude fucking wrecking them. Because it just, I don't know, it played the A for the hard power element of it, sort of taking it back. But then it was sort of in my opinion, when you have scenes like this, it does help elevate and educate in a kind of important way how weak the position of this particular brand of hard power is. The ideology, not what it can do. Obviously, it has done terrible, horrible things throughout history. But when you break it down, and if enough people sort of stand up, then that's when it sort of hopefully seesaws.
Yeah.
But I loved that sort of was the crescendo moment, and I would have been happy if the film sort of ended there once Sammy went back and all that stuff. But the post or the mid-credit scene, I really, really, really enjoyed with Stack and Mary played by Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah.
When they visit, oh my God, when they visit Sammy at age 80 something.
Yeah, it's a 90s now, right?
What I loved, it was 93, I think. And what I loved about that so much, and this is another vampire trope that I fucking love when it hits. You find out that Smoke and Stack made a deal, even though one was part of the other group. The part was become a vampire. And now, so they're the same age because they're still vampires, but they made a deal that they wouldn't hurt Sammy or stop him or whatever. And I love when vampirism, it can stand for a lot of things. And in here, we're talking about sort of the over-encompassing whiteness, sort of the taking of a culture and sort of trying to use it for your own vocations. I love that in vampire mythology, whether it's the thirst for blood, whether it's a man or a woman that the other vampire is obsessed with, whether, all of these things, there's always some sort of, there's always a character. I'm always the most interested in the vampire character that is doing the bad shit, is a vampire, is there. but has some sort of like that last tinge of humanity where they won't cross one specific line because it makes it interesting. You are part of this hive, this system, but you are a splinter in it.
Yeah.
And
they're the last remaining, right? Of this
coven.
That
whatever.
we believe. Yeah.
Yeah. But like it felt so cool to see that and to have it be Stack, who initially also like fell in love with Sammy's music. And I don't know, like it.
He also tells an interesting story there, which was like, I remember that day. Like, I can't remember what Sammy says, but
he
like,
said, I wake up still with night terrors and frozen asleep.
Yeah.
But whenever I think back, that was probably the best day of my life.
Yeah.
And then
but before
Stack, Stack says the same thing. It was like, yeah, me too. It was the last day I saw my brother.
And
it was the last sunrise I saw. And so it
represents promise. Like, I think that's what the whole first half of this movie represents.
Yeah. And I guess it's interesting to look at Stack as someone who took the deal, like whether forcibly or not, but someone who took the deal and now lives with it. And it's like, on the one hand, he's cursed. On the other hand, he lives forever.
He lives forever as a blood-sucking monster, but he's alive.
Yeah.
And that's such a weird, it's so fucking good.
Yeah. It's cool. Yeah. I like, towards the back end with the vampire stuff, I guess I like that the sort of interplay of ideas there of like how this is, as you've coined it, soft power, and how that soft power works over time, which is that how it can be corroding, but also nourishing in some way. You don't get to be, you don't get to live forever without having to like give up part of your soul. You don't get to like play the guitar as well as you do without having to sell your soul to the devil. Yeah, I like all of that. I did, again, as a viewer, find myself kind of looking at the movie in two halves, which is that the first half, so exciting, so interesting, and almost nothing to do with vampires. Like almost has nothing to do with anything supernatural other than the sense that there's something else at play there. And then the back half, I think, is filled with interesting ideas, but, kind of for me, don't quite land in the same way as The Shot. Like don't quite come together as cleanly, as visually interestingly as The Shot.
I want to give a backwards compliment. So when the music shot happened and the music started twisting before the visuals, I actually was bucked off it. I was like, what? This doesn't sound what?
Because there's a DJ involved.
Well, no, but it wasn't. It was less, to be maybe it was a sound mix in the theater. I have no idea. It was less the visuals, because instantly when I figured out what they were going for, I'm like, oh, this is neat. But like the music, like the way the music mixed, it bucked my brain. And that's the only time the movie ever knocked me out of being like really enthralled in it. And I was like, I'm in a movie theater. I'm watching a movie. This feels weird. But then this sort of goes back to the compliment of it. The Shot is done so well that it literally, when the movie knocked me back to zero after being so engrossed in it, it fucking ratcheted me right back to where I was supposed to be. And I can't think of another film in recent history that has a moment that bucks me off the horse so hard that then in the next minute can just 30 seconds can be like, no, and pick me back up and put me on it. And I was like, this is fucking craft.
Yeah.
Like I lost my shit when I was knocked away and then brought back within the span of a minute. Like I just thought that was kind of magical.
It also mirrors how we first see Remick.
Yeah.
It seems like he just falls off a horse. Falls out the sky.
Yep.
And you're just like, oh,
what the fuck?
This is like, it's no longer all this beautiful scenery we set up. It's this guy who's
burning in the desert.
Yeah. Who is this guy? And
he just jumps into the movie. Yeah.
It's also the first time you kind of see white people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's like one of those things
that's
where
actually a quality of the movie that I think I really, really liked, which is that when we got to the sharecroppers, for example, there wasn't in a good way, the film is not interested in telling that power dynamic about the external factors that are against these people. It's more about the internal dynamic of like, who are these people? What do they want? How do they know each other? Where did they come from? What does Smoke and Stack want to do here?
And the way that they both, the two brothers, play with the community. Like, I think the money thing is a real solid argument. Smoke is like, what the fuck? This needs to sustain. We don't have enough money to keep doing this.
That's such a great detail.
Yeah.
That they are losing money.
Yeah.
You know, like I love that.
Stack is like, this is, people worked all fucking week for this.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to tell that fucking 60-year-old dude who's busting his ass 80 hours a week that he can't fucking have a beer?
Yeah.
Like, no. And so it's like they are criminals and they're doing their shit, but like they both want the same. They want the same thing, which would be success, but I think they think of what success is differently. Smoke thinks of it like purely sort of monetarily. No, you're not purely.
Yeah.
But and Stack is more like no. Like this is there's things that are more valuable than just this, even if it kind of goes away.
I think Stack, thinks about it in terms of not necessarily money, but like in longevity. How do we keep this going?
Yeah.
Like it's a great idea. We can pull it off, obviously, in one day. But how do we ensure that we can keep coming back? Because that's exactly what Delroy Lindo's character says to him is like, you're going to pay me $20 tonight, but I've been going to this other place for 10 years and they're going to be there for another 10 years. Where are you guys going to be? And I think Stack, thinks that way as well.
Yeah. No, and I think it's beautiful that they're twins.
Yeah.
And they represent the yin and yang of the universe. Where as much as Stack might be enthralled by music, arts, women, he was also a pimp.
Yeah.
And like these things are the kind of the fruits of life.
Yeah.
Smoke is very bottom line.
Yeah.
And for reasons, like we haven't even talked about Ruthie. Not Ruthie.
Annie or Mary? Which one?
No. Annie.
Annie. Yeah. Annie's amazing.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of Beatrice.
Smokes the wife.
His mother of a child.
The mother of his child.
Yeah. That's Annie.
Was that Annie?
Yeah, that's her name.
Like the way that her story comes into play, so beautiful. And like, so again, the thing about the ending that really works is him keeling over and seeing his wife, his daughter and his wife.
Yeah.
And her saying, you can hold her. You can hold her. Like that's where that whole thing really sinks.
And also she very much is like, let go.
Yeah.
The whole time Smoke has to stay in control.
Yeah.
Has to kill off all the Klansmen.
Yeah.
Has to bargain with his brother instead of killing him. Like it's everything. And she's like, let go.
Yeah. It's really that's where the ending sequence works for me. Everything around, like, again, the mechanics of like the vampires and then like killing the clan. I just found myself kind of
but
like
even
losing the thread.
Annie's sort of supernatural knowledge of different cultural things in her space. It plays into sort of like something I really liked, even at the end when she's telling him to let go, is it plays into like, even though she's dealing with like, she's like, oh shit, they're fucking vampires. I thought they were this other thing, but they're not. Like she's very like matter of fact about it, even though that's just because that's her world. She is sort of, I don't know how to put it, but like the emotional pragmatist, where like she understands the importance of what is happening in the specific moment and tries to lead him in those directions. It didn't work before when their child passed away and he left. And now hopefully through this horrible, terrible night and the end of his life, that then he finally sort of listens to her.
And when she says this line, I think as she's dying or as she's about to die, which is like, there's someone waiting for me. Like there's someone out there waiting for me. So that's where I got to go. And it's like this real beautiful understanding of like the universe is not just this place, which I think really, again, is really, really beautiful.
There's also, even with that kind of comparing the two, Smoke and Annie, there's a moment in the film where when you first introduced to Annie, there are two little girls at her store and they're paying with like, again, fake money. And
he gets pissed.
He's like, you're not going to be able to sustain. He's thinking very bottom line. And she's like, I'm here for my community. I'm like, I don't care.
It's, the other movie that I thought about, which I think we've talked about, is Steve McQueen's Small Axe and Lovers Rock. I thought a lot about Lovers Rock in that first half of the first half of this movie, in the way that like music isn't just like this device that's being told to us in the film. It is the fabric by which the film is wrapped. And so it is entirely like the movie is musical in some way, because of the way it expresses music as a extension of not just community, but like past, present. And again, I think, coming back to this question of like history lesson versus what it is that when the movie does that, and the movie is so good at kind of wrapping it up, Francis Ford Coppola had this weird thing about Apocalypse Now, which is that when someone said, "Is this a story about Vietnam?" and he was like, "No, it is Vietnam." And I think when I'm talking about like a history lesson versus history, I think versus the way this doesn't feel like history, and that's what I'm trying to sort of get at, which is that this is not a history lesson. This is history.
Gotcha.
You know, and this is, and in a way, history represents us where we are today as well. And so I think that's the way I'm kind of like expressing why I think there's a, you know, an element of genius at work here.
Gotcha.
Because it is entirely within the fabric of what it is doing, rather than just like telling you that. It is actually part of the fabric of how the movie operates. And I think that's really beautiful. One other thing, just, you know, in terms of like, I talked about like how sexy this movie was. This is a movie where everyone eats.
Yeah.
And I posted that earlier. I was like, this is the most pro cunnilingus film I think I've seen in a while. And I am here for it. Because there's like, everyone in this movie is going to town. And like, and it's not treated as like something unique or strange. It was like, it's part of like
life.
It's part of, you know, like it's part of like, it's like thinking about Love is Rock as well. Like, the consuming of like life and love and joy and sex and like passion, all of that coming together. You know, like when Sammy, you know, finally is with, I can't remember who's name.
Perline.
You know, he's like, I just want to taste you.
Yeah.
And it's like this beautiful expression, you know?
Do you remember when you're first introduced to Sammy and Stack riding by themselves?
Sammy, yes.
So when
he says like, you got that guitar back there, you're going to play it, right?
So no, this is even before.
Oh, and he talks about like the button.
Yeah, he's talking about he's explaining to him how to eat someone out, operate via eating ice cream and a button. He's like telling him like, this is how you do it.
Yeah. But when it gets to it, it's beautiful, right? Like, and then I mean, the six, you know.
There's another thing too, which actually twists into. I'm sorry, I'm a vampire guy.
No.
The sort of, you're talking about like consuming in that way and sort of like the joyousness of either sex or that sort of the element of that sort of this in this what is essentially supposed to be a very happy place. But like the juke joint is supposed to be a place that everyone is having a good time. Then the vampires show up. And the vampires they basically they're doing not the same thing, but the same thing in a fucked up way that's going to break everything. And it's the moment when Mary is already turned. Is sort of flips the sort of beauty of this stuff on its head and how this element can ruin that element as well. I don't know. I think it's very clever how it does vampire stuff, especially when we're talking about, mixing it with sort of either not only like sex but sexual taboos. Like again, this is a very pro eating out sort of film. That is something you don't get to see normally in movies, specifically also a vampire movie, because vampires can also be sort of placeholders for like the taboo of that. And here it's like, no. Here's a group of people that this is all fine and natural and good. And the vampires will still come fuck it up. But like, it was a nice juxtaposition.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. It's, I guess maybe the other thing is that the success of Coogler in this moment here is that he made an R-rated film, which is frank and, like explicit, but joyous about sex, as well as being like sit in a part of American history that is typically fraught with tragedy, you know, like, and so he pulls all of that together and makes it entertaining as hell, you know, like that, like there's a sort of joy in watching a movie that is, I said, I was talking to one of our listeners who lives in another country and who, for whom those scenes were cut out, or they weren't necessarily cut out. Censors had zoomed in so you wouldn't see what was going on because they didn't want to, alter the soundtrack. But it's, you know, like you obviously go to places where violence is okay, but sex is taboo. And this is a movie that's doing all those things. You know, like I think I saw an interview with Coogler where someone said, you know, like, was there a point where like someone was saying, you're trying to do too much here? You know, there's too much movie at play. But you know, the thing about, and I'll bring it back to the shot is doing too much, but it's woven so elegantly that like it can be that rich. It can like be telling so much story. And that's why it's genius. That he brings all of this together. And, you know, to bring it back to like Wakanda Forever, there's a moment in Wakanda Forever where we see Namor. We see like I think a birth, either the birth of a child or something underwater that's happening, and ultimately you're sort of waiting for the film to kind of like show Namor to be the villain, to sacrifice his own people or something, but it's actually not. It's just a beautiful scene of like a ritual that's going on, and it extends out in its full length and it kind of stays there. It's that thing that Coogler is good at, which is that he doesn't, like shy away from, he doesn't hurry through it. Like it's that same sort of sensibility here, which is that these details matter and these details are the story. And he's not rushing to get through to the vampire scene, and that's like for me, I was kind of mixed on Coogler, but this film to me elevates him to the upper echelon of American filmmakers. Like it really,
he got the deal for it.
He got the deal, but like Jordan Peele would Get Out, like it elevated it to like the upper echelon of like who is working today. And this is one of those cases. Yeah. It's so good on that level.
This movie's fucking great. Instant physical buy the second it is on.
Oh, 1,000%.
I don't know. Final thoughts, anybody? We kind of went through a lot.
No, I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having me, guys. It was great talking about this movie, getting it out of my brain.
Right. Before we go see it again, this being the only podcast about the film Sinners, Stephen, when you are not once again gracing us with your presence, where can folks find you on the interwebs and beyond?
Yes, you can find me on, what is it called now, X, or Instagram at Stephen Wobbits. Just replace the R with a W. Stephen Wobbits.
Excellent. Shahir, when you are not using all of your illicitly gained alcohol to throw a giant party somewhere in a building that definitely doesn't live up to code, where can folks find you?
You can find Moonshine Alley at my website, www.suvanova.com. That's SUVANOVA. Matt, when you are consuming the blood of life, where can people find you?
You can find me just sucking over at my website, extra history and extra credits. By the time on YouTube, by the time this comes out, will it be out yet? It will be on Nebula. If you're listening to this on Nebula, we have a one-off on the Holy Grail. And it is one of my favorite episodes we've done in a long time because it talks a lot about like what holy relics actually mean. And like that we couch it in a thing called Grail or Fail, where we do a game show to determine which of the historical artifacts, I'm doing a lot of air quotes for the audio listeners, that basically like which one is the real Holy Grail. And we do it in like a 60s style.
We're also like the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
One of the things I say, well, this one looks like it could just melt the skin off of a Nazi's face. But like it's one of my absolute favorite episodes. If you're interested in sort of like not necessarily the religiosity, I don't even know if that's a word, of that thing, but what holy relics mean and what objects to religion can represent, we dive into that a lot in there, and I hope you check that out because it was just an absolute blast and a piece of historical stuff that I don't normally get to.
Nice, that's awesome.
Yeah. Next week. Email us in onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of Sinners or anything else.
We actually have some great emails that are in there. If we have a guest on, we tend to skip over the emails for that week, but we will come back to those as soon as we have the opportunity. Thank you for emailing us.
Yeah, next week isn't Thunderbolts. No way.
It drops. It comes out the second. Yeah.
Is that next week?
Yep. Crazy.
Oh no, we'll have to do it the following week. So we'll have one thing between this and Thunder.
I was also going to say it is our 10-year anniversary coming up at some point as well. That we have to find an episode to. It is 10 years since we started the podcast,
and as is tradition, we won't celebrate it till 11. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out something to do. Maybe we'll do. I don't know. I'll figure it out. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, everybody, and until next time, have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.